some modules can be 14 weeks longer, 14 weeks long, the others can be shorter.
Yeah.
So can you just apply that? Would that apply to like for a module or just a specific one?
A specific module. So if informatics this year is 14 weeks, last year it was 12 weeks, right? You could have a module that is 14 weeks. You could have one that is 20 something weeks, like a year module.
So that's variable because it can vary.
Yes. So that's the reason why I said you could have 14, you could have 12, you could have any number. So it's not a fixed number of weeks. Yeah. So you need to actually tell me how many weeks that semester is. Yeah.
Like last year, our first year started late. So I think it was 12 weeks.
12 weeks, yeah.
12 weeks.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, has everyone done the attendance? Those that arrived on time, that is. There is 1 more minute, so we'll allow it. Online people, please do fill in the attendance as well. Okay, so today we're basically going to be looking at design. But before we do that, do you guys have any questions on the stuff that we've done so far? I'm unfortunately not going to be entertaining a lot of practical 1 questions at this point because we have a lot of content to go through. If we do finish it, you can ask your practical 1 questions. But also at this point in time, you have 1 day remaining. You should have ideally been done with practical 1 or at least spoken to the assistants about the issues that you guys are having. The assistance lab is running on campus in E-Ring 211. We haven't quite set up the online one as yet. We are, I think, trying to work on it, but all of the informatics 1 assistants have been told that they need to be on campus. So if you do go there and there isn't a assistant, you can just drop me a DM. Most of them do tell me if they do have issues and they can't make it. You should expect that. Some of them don't necessarily have, do have other issues that they are dealing with, but most of them should be available at the time that they said they would be available in the lab. Everyone know where the assistant's roster is? Okay, so please make use of the assistants as far as practical questions are concerned. But as for the code and other stuff, for the course content we've covered so far, do you guys have any questions that you want us to answer before we get started with today's tutorial? Yes.
I remember the last practical we did, we had information that we had to copy and paste.
Yeah.
So would you do the same in this practical?
Yes, so that title bar is still there in practical 1. So it's still.
Okay, so there will be space for you to copy and paste that title.
So basically just copy paste it on top.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it will be a comment.
It'll be, yeah, so it won't be red.
Today.
So line 1, just line 1, paste it there, fill in all those details, start coding after that. Yeah. Anyone else? Okay, so today we're going to be dealing with your handwritten design. So you would have noticed on the practical question paper, it does say no design, no marks. We do mean that. If you come to the assistants on a Friday afternoon and you have no design, we will not mark it. Ideally, we know it's a little too late now, but ideally the idea behind the design is so that you solve your problem before you start coding it. And I've noticed Friday afternoon, most of you most probably don't know the full layout of a design, but I saw a lot of people with pen in hand and paper trying to scribble out something, some sort of, this is how the calculation is going to be, this is what the design will look like, or the interface will look like. You guys were jotting things down, correct? Did no one jot anything down? Did you just start coding? Is there anyone who started coding? Just started coding. How did that go for you? Did it? So you sat down, you downloaded the question paper, the practical question, and you just started coding. Is that what you did? How did that work out for you? Not too many problems. Okay, maybe she's one of the lucky ones. But also, did you fully understand the question when you started working it out? Did you, what process did you go through before the actual starting to type out stuff? Okay, no, it's not a bad example, but what I want to understand is when you sat there, what went through, did you fully understand the question? So you processed everything internally until you understood it. Okay, so you searched for stuff, and then after you found that stuff, you just retained all of that knowledge in your head without writing anything down. Okay, that is a very it's amazing actually, because not a lot of people are able to do that. So just the understanding of the question, sometimes you just need to jot it down. Usually this is for your test and exam as well. I usually tell students to, when we had given them the paper in their hand or online, to come with a highlighter or a pencil or different colors so that you can highlight the important words to make sure you do actually understand the question. So if you are able to solve the problem on paper before you actually start coding, right? When you start trying to test if it works, if your logic works, and on paper you're getting the wrong answer, what does that mean? Is it the computer's fault? Have you started coding? No, you haven't. So when you start by designing on paper and you kind of prove that your logic works or your calculations work on paper, the only thing you have to worry about now is converting that which you have on paper onto a programming platform, which should be very easy because we give you most of the stuff that you need in order to do your practicals anyway. So the biggest thing you need is to understand the problem. And if you're able to understand the problem and solve it on paper, then it's easy to make a program. But if you start by just programming, we get to a point where we've had students come to us and say, Visual Studio is breaking my code. And we have a look, and it's not Visual Studios, it's your understanding of the question. So which is why we say we highly recommend that you start with a design before you actually start coding. But again, for your guys group, this week, we do understand because we haven't necessarily taught you how to do a proper design. Okay, Prof, do you have anything to add?
Ladies and gentlemen, when you get to the exam, so for now, your practicals are really easy. I mean, Mr. Lebier's question is something very, very simple. But when you get to the third year, the exam or the second semester test, which counts 65%, by the way, of your entire semester mark, you can't afford to implement the wrong things. Now, if you had just go, oh, here's the question paper, start programming right away, I don't think it's going to be non-stop typing, write all the code, and then the end. There's got to be some planning, there's got to be some thought into how this is all going to work. And it makes more sense for you to put it down on paper, so that if you think about it, imagine you were baking something, you're making a dish, and you go, I don't have a recipe, so I'm going to try a few of these things, see what happens, and then play it by ear. How successful do you think that dish is going to turn out? Let's say halfway through you go, oh, it turns out I need some butter. I don't have that. Now you've got to go to the shops and get it. So the whole idea of having it on pen, having on paper, doing the design, you're basically gathering all the information about your question and saying, these are the things I'm going to need. In other words, these are the variables I require. These are the things I have to do. These are the things I'm going to have as input from the user. These are all the things I'm going to have to calculate and output back to the user, because when you get to your second semester test or your exam, it's going to be multiple questions. For now, how many things do you have to calculate? I don't think they know. How many things do you have to calculate for practical one? Okay, that's small little things. But in your semester test, it's going to be calculate this, calculate this, calculate this. And each calculation is going to be built on what you previously calculated. So the correctness, and here's the other thing we need to warn you about. We give marks for correctness, as in correct execution. So we give you marks for code, but we also give you marks for correctly executing what it needs to be done. So now let's say you wrote all this code, yay! We run it and it turns out you've answered the questions incorrectly each and every time. Now we can tell you that correctness counts 50% of your entire paper. So it doesn't matter if your code is amazing and it works, but when we execute it, it turns out you didn't answer this question, you didn't actually answer this question, wrong. If you're lucky and your code is perfect, you might pass 50%. But do you want 50% for your second semester test? The answer is no. Why not? Because if you get 50% for your second semester test, you don't promote. Remember, we talked about this promotion. You need 70% semester mark to not write our exam. And all of you are like, yeah, we don't want to write the exam, we want to get 70%. Well, hi. So your strategy is at the second semester test, please get as high a mark as possible. Is it possible to get 100%? Absolutely. Answer the question how it should be done. Okay. Now, some of you might be able to go as you're typing along, non-stop, and as you go along, you realize, oh, I made a mistake, let me fix it. Made a mistake, let me fix it. That wastes your time. You've got 3 hours. Are you going to finish it? Chances are no. So please do yourselves a favor. From the get-go, read the question. Make sure you know what's being asked. Write it down on paper. Have your game plan. These are the things I need. These are the things I must do. For each of these, this is how you write the algorithm for them. I will do this, I will do this, and I'll do this. These are the things I must do. So that if you have your plan in place, then paper on your side, you open up Visual Studio, you've got your user interface design telling you these are all the buttons and everything you need. You go, this is what it looks like. Drag. Oh, these must be the names. Apply them, and then click on all the buttons, and you go to your algorithm, and you're like, all right, these are the steps that I must take for implementing my code. Test it. Happiness, provided it works. So please get into the practice of doing design. Okay, we're going to tell you, please do your design. Are we going to know that you didn't do your design first? Not really, but you're only not helping yourself. Why would you self-sabotage your own chances of passing this module as well as possible? There's another reason why you want to do as well as possible in the module. Some of you might, let me just pass, I'll be happy. If you get as high a mark as possible, and it's a distinction, the university might give you money. Or not like, yay, money to spend on parties and all that, but it goes towards your varsity fees. It goes towards your textbooks. Think about that. Also, we have, the Academy has the Academy Awards, not the Oscars.
Unfortunately.
No, but we actually acknowledge the top 10 Informatics 1A students every year. You know how competitive the top 10 spaces in Informatics 1A is? The lowest mark is 96%.
We literally have to get to a point where we're distinguishing
Point
9 and 10 because of point something.
Or 10 and 11.
Yeah, 10 and 11 because of point something to get it to 10. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so we're going to get started with a design. So the question that you see up here is a question we asked the Tuesday group to come up with. And one of the students said they would like to know how many 2-liter Coke bottles they can buy with 500 Rand. So this is a typical easy question that is similar to your practicals at this point. So the typical design parts is we usually ask you, when it comes to design, we usually ask for input outputs, variables, algorithm, events and actions, and your test data. Okay, so what I want you guys to do, both online and the people that are sitting here, is read the question and write down what you think the question requires of you. And while you're doing that, you can go as far as writing down what your inputs and outputs are as well. So please put up your mask. So you can write down, interpret. How do you understand this question? So rewrite the question in a way that you understand it. Give me the inputs that you would need and the outputs that you would need. So everyone remembers what inputs and outputs are, right? Okay, go ahead. I'll give you about 2-3 minutes. And by that, I mean, by 2-3 minutes, I mean at some point after those 2-3 minutes, I'm going to start picking at people to give me the answer.
Okay, and just write it in English. You don't have to start writing code or anything. Just plain, simple English. What do you think the inputs are? What do you think the outputs are?
Okay, this online group has been very quiet. No one has said a single thing. Is everyone, can you guys hear us?
Do you know how to use the chat? Okay.
Okay, they are alive. So please do participate as well. We're going to pick on you guys just as much as we're going to pick on the ones that are sitting in class right now. And ladies and gentlemen, don't see it as if we do actually pick on you. Don't see it as we are trying to bully you. Usually your facial expressions tell us a lot about your knowledge retention. And if you look puzzled, we want to find out exactly what it is that you don't understand so that we can explain it a little bit easier for you or try and expand on that. And when we do ask you for the answers that you have written down, please tell us exactly what you have written down. There is no shame in being wrong. This is a class exercise, and by answering and us correcting the issue that you had, you are learning something from that as well.
Also, you can be assured that you are not the only people in the venue that has made that mistake. We can promise you that. And so if it turns out your answer is incorrect, you are actually helping everybody else in the class learn from that.
Yeah. So there's a question on line that says, is input the calculation and output just the answer? You're correct in one of those. Output is just the answer, but input is not a calculation. Input is what you give the program in order for it to make the calculation. Okay, are we still writing? Is everyone done?
Okay, this shouldn't be a very complicated one because this is a very basic problem at this point. Obviously, by the time you get to the exam/semester test, this will be a lot more complicated, and that's why we're taking baby steps to prepare you for the big project.
Please don't worry about 2, 3, 4, and 5. We're not dealing with those at the moment. Just 1.
Yeah, English. What do you expect the inputs for this program to be, and outputs? What do you expect that to be? So remember, your inputs are anything that the user will have to provide your computer program, and your outputs are whatever the computer program is expected to give back to the user.
Okay, so I'm just going to start in front, going up every row. So if you're the only person sitting in your row, chances are I'm going to pick on you. Yes. So what is your interpretation of the question first?
Well, how many bottles to get a quick can you buy
500 Rand. Okay, so how many inputs do you have?
I think there's only going to be one input.
One input. Okay, let's leave it at that. Who here has more than one input? Okay, there's more than one input. Online, how many inputs do you guys have? So that's why we're just trying to get that understanding of, is that a question or you're answering the two? Okay, so we've got another one that has 2. Anyone with more than 2? Anyone with more than 2 inputs? Anyone with no inputs? No. Okay, so who else here in attendance has 1 input? Okay, ma'am, what is your 1 input? The price of the Coke bottle. Okay, so we've got input. No. Right. Okay.
Okay, let's ask out on online people what the output is.
Online people, what is the output? How many outputs are there? One output, number of bottles. Okay, so we've got one output. Number of bottles. Okay, man, you said you had 2 inputs. What is the other input? So amount of money. So let me just add that here. So is that amount, what is the amount of money of what?
Now, since you said 500 rand, maybe like sometimes transfer for 200 rand.
Okay.
So that's why.
Okay, it does make sense. Anyone else online that has 2 inputs? What's the second input? So we have one person that says price per 2-liter bottle and the 500 rand and one output. Brand of Coke. That's what? Input. Other input is 500 divided by, no, that wouldn't be an input, because remember, ladies and gentlemen, an input is information that the user needs to give the program in order for it to function. Okay, so what was your interpretation of the question?
So my interpretation of question is the same as hers, but then I thought that every time a person is going to be using our thing, it won't always be 500 rand.
So you're essentially saying our system is going to be used for a single scenario, a single case study. No, I mean the way it is right now.
Like my
It's-
interpretation.
Yes, because you said you made it in such a way that you can allow the person to change how much money they have. Okay, yes. So the way that the question is set up right now only works for 500, and it is very limited. Your understanding of it to go, but hey, you're not always going to have 500. It might be people who want to know how many bottles they can buy with a different amount of money, which is not incorrect. But what we're trying to get you guys to do is follow the instructions or answer the question we've given you exactly how we've asked it to you. Okay? There are going to be situations, even with practical 1, I've had students that say, but what if this, but what if that, but what if that? I do appreciate the fact that you are thinking ahead to go, this program has the ability to do more than just what it does. But the issue is, as Prof. Lung mentioned, those 3 hours that you're going to get in your exam. You don't want to, so the answer is, the short of it is, if you did make it change, and you did put 500 in your program worked, you would ideally still get all your marks, right? But it would take you slightly longer to finish than it would take someone else who just answered the question. So that's where those 3 hours come in. Your question paper for your test and exam is going to be in such a way that we know it should take you about 3 hours to do exactly what we've asked. So the moment you start doing other things, adding on to the question, you are answering parts of the question that were not asked. How many marks do you think you're going to get for doing something we did not ask you to? 0, right? So you've spent time that you should otherwise be answering questions we asked you, answering something that no one asked. Okay, that's why it is important for you, that first part we asked, how are you interpreting this question? What do you get from the question asked? So just answer the question itself, and if you have some time afterwards, you can try and clear up.
The other issue is that the minute you start over-analyzing a problem and you add in these extra little features, you run the risk of creating scenarios that could break the program. So what we find is that who actually does well in our semester test? It's the students who are studying, but they sit in class and they pay attention and they're listening for the things that we tell them to do. Because you've got these students who've done programming in high school, for example, and they reckon they know what's going on, they're not going to sit in class, they're not going to pay attention. Then when they finally sit in the semester test or exam, they then look at this question and they think, whoa, this question is way too easy. It can't just be asking all these simple things, and then they add on a whole bunch of other things, and they make it a lot more complicated than what we told people in class to do, and then it ends up being incorrect. So it might be that on paper when they run it, so when we execute the program and we enter the values and we get the same result, and we go, yay, this is perfect. Then we stop the program and we look behind the code, and then we realize the way they've implemented it is completely wrong, because they've overcomplicated the matters. Now no longer the way good programming practices should be followed, and now we have to fail them. So it's really important that you realize when you write the code, just because a program functions 100% does not mean that the principles were applied properly in the background, and that's where, we said correctness 50%, but also 50% on code. So at the end of the day, they then get, say, 65%, and then they flip out, they demand that Mr. Lebier explains to them why they only got 65, because they're a genius, they should get 100, and it turns out that Mr. Lebier didn't mark it, an assistant did, and that assistant was absolutely lenient giving them those marks, and he fails them.
Honestly speaking, it does get, not to discourage those of you that do have coding experience, but we've noticed that the students with no coding experience tend to do better in informatics because they do just what we ask them. Yeah. No, there's no such a scenario. You can't get the full 50% for correctness if there's something wrong in the back. So here's an example. Let's say input counted 10 marks, right? Those 10 marks will be divided between 5 for correctness and 5 for code. Your correctness is determined by the code. So if you get 3 out of 5 for code, the maximum you can get for correctness is 3 out of 5. You can still get less for correctness, but it's based on code. So chances of you getting more for correctness than you do for code, it does not exist. Yeah, that's how we calculate correctness. Yes. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, does everyone understand why money is not necessarily an input? Because it's not a variable that changes. It's a constant. But we've gotten some people online, and I think some of you as well, who still have it as an input, but say instead of being 200 or 350, it's going to be 500 each time. Do you have any people in attendance that are of that idea? We do have a few online people that did mention that 2 inputs. One is the price of Coke, and the other is the 500.
However, technically, if you do it that way, it's not really input, because you don't ask the user to provide the 500. That's like creating a form and going, here's 2 text boxes, and then the instruction for the second text box is put 500 here. Why can't you put 500 there?
It would be very redundant, so we removed that. So I'm going to go on the limb here and say I disagree with the one output. Yes. So the way I interpreted the question is that I saw that a user they patch and change. Yeah. So since the computer recognizes this budget, I think it cannot be relevant for us to get the number of those. What we need is what the price of the bottle. Price of the bottle, yes, that's where we've got the price, so we don't need the 500 because it's a fixed value. The computer will, you can hard code it and tell it the amount is 500, yes.
Because I was under the impression that input isn't restricted to solely like user input, that it includes variables.
No, that's why in the design we have inputs, outputs, then variables. So input and variables are different. Input is solely when I'm sitting there and I'm dealing with this program. What do I need to give the program in order to progress, in order for something to happen? Okay. So as I said, I disagree with the one output. Does anyone have 2 outputs? Okay, what's your first output? The change we get. Okay. What's the first output? So your first output is the same as this one. It's how many bottles and the change, right? Who's against that? Yeah. You're against it. Why? What is the rationale behind you being against my and that lovely lady's assessment of two outputs?
It's just asking how many bottles.
Just asking how many bottles. So you don't care about my change.
Ask for change.
Okay, again. So ladies and gentlemen, she is 100% correct. What does the question ask you to do? Does the question say, how many Coke bottles can I buy with a 500 Rand and how much change will I have? No. Is the program concerned with whether or not we have change? No. Do you see how we can impose our own understanding of a certain question and bring in, as Prof mentioned, scenarios that could ideally break our code? Keep it simple. Do exactly what the question asks you and nothing more. If it says nothing about change, even though we know in real life, there's no way you can go to a shop and go, here's 500, and they tell you a bottle of Coke is 21 Rand. You need to get some change there, right? But that's not what we're catering for. Our program strictly asks us to cater to see how many bottles can I buy with 500? That is the question.
See,
Okay.
we're trying to get you into this mentality because we don't want you overcomplicating things. Don't overinterpret, don't overanalyze the questions we give you. Okay, we are going to upload last year's semester test and exam. They're actually the same level of difficulty. So if you can do either one of them, then you are ready. But you'll notice that once you, obviously at this point, many of you do not know how to program, you're getting there, so it's going to look very difficult to do. But once you've learned all the tools for solving the problem, then it becomes a matter of understanding the question and figuring out, what do I have to do here? And now that I know this is what I have to do here, which of the various tools that were taught to me must be used here to solve this problem? Right, and so the minute you overinterpret the question and say, oh, I must do this, but I also want to do all these other things, which actually is in our human nature to do so because we want to be helpful, right? Because if I asked you, does anyone have the time here? What are you going to tell me? You're going to look at your watch and say, oh, it's 13:36. I didn't ask that. I asked, do you have the time? But all of us will want to help. And that's the same thing here. You saw this problem, you're like, oh, these are all the things I can do to help you. Don't do that. Okay. When you're out in industry, sure, tell your clients, hey, but what about all these nice things you can do? That's helpful. But for our assessment purposes now, we're starting baby steps, focus on just ticking those boxes so that you pass this module.
There's an online question here that adds to what I said about highlighting. So if you just get a piece of colored pen and just highlight what you think is important in the question, in the practical question paper. So for instance, the question that the online student is asking is the size of the bottle also fixed? Anyone can anyone answer the question? And I see that gentleman over there going, it's obvious, it's there, right? These things happen. I've gotten students for Practical 1 who came to me and said, but sir, is this for informatics or other subjects? And usually I just said, it comes across as rude, but I say, what does the question say? And after they say it themselves, they read it out themselves, they go, oh, it says for a module, not informatics, so it can be any module. But does that mean these people are stupid? No, it just, there's a couple of things when you speed read or when you just want to get to understand, you miss. So that's why I'm saying, if you just highlight, go, okay, what do I need to do? For instance, on this question, unfortunately, I can't highlight on Notepad++, but what do I need to do? I need to calculate. I highlight calculate. Calculate is very important here. How many, what am I looking at? 2-liter bottles of Coke. How much am I buying them with? 500. So you've identified the important parts of that entire question. What I need to do is calculate 2-liter bottles of Coke, and I've got 500 Rand. Okay, makes it easier to understand when those words are literally sticking out of the page at you in a different color. Okay.
Which is the reason why we tell you do a design. Because if you do a design, you would have picked this up and you go, oh wait, because it forces you to think about it. Because these are all the little headings, and these are just some of the headings of a full design we need you to do. But by putting some thought into these parts of the design, it's forcing you to be able to answer questions that lead you to discovering what do I do for this project.
Okay, so are we all on the same page? One input, one output. Everyone understand why we ended up at that conclusion? Does anyone still have a different number? Online people, does anyone else have a different number? Okay, if not, let's move on to the next part, which is 2. Assuming that number 1 is correct, right? We're going to move on to 2, which is the variable. So draw a little table on your piece of paper and give me the variable names you would have and what data type those variables will be. Online people, please do this as well. I'm actually going to pick on you guys this time for more information to fill it in. So just write out all of the variables you think you would need to answer this along with their data types. I'll give you another 2 minutes. Okay, are we all done? I've got some answers from online, so I'm just going to put them here. So we've got price as a double, and we've got bottles as a integer, and yeah, those are the only 2 that I have from the online group from 2 different students. Anyone else in attendance have anything else? Yes. The? Sorry? You might get what? Decimal. Okay. Okay, we'll handle that. We'll handle that. So do you have another one, or do you just have 2? You have money from the user. That would be money from the user, which is what, 500? Okay, why do we want to put 500 as a variable? What is the justification? What is the reason that you want to make it a variable? Because it's going to help you do the calculation. Do you know how much money you need? Yes. Can you not just write it out? Can you not just write 500? You can. So there's no real reason to make it a variable. Right? So how do you make, what criteria is there to make something a variable? If you're going to use it more than once, if it's a constant and you're going to use it more than once, then you can make it a variable. In that case, when it changes, instead of changing, let's say now it's no longer 500, it's 550. Right now, those of you that listen to the budget speech, the drinkers and smokers in attendance, your guys' tax has gone up. The vapors as well, you're going to be taxed £2.50 per 100 milliliters. So every single time it goes up, tax goes up. So if we are using tax in multiple places, right? Let's say right now, currently tax is £5. If we put 5, let's say we have to refer to this thing 10 times in all our calculations. What do you think is going to happen when it's now £7? You're going to have to, every place where we refer to it, we're going to have to change it, right? So how do we remedy that? We make it a variable. And then we say tax. And we say tax is equal to 5. And in every other place where we want to refer to tax, we use the variable itself. So when it changes, we only have to change the assignment of tax is equal to 5 to 7. And then all of those will change as well, right? But in this case, how many times are we using 500? Once. Does it qualify to be put as a variable? No, you just put it there. If it does change, how many times are we going to change it? Once. So there's no real reason to make it a variable. Okay. Anyone disagree with price? Are we happy with price? Price being a double? Does everyone have price as a double as one of the variables? Does anyone not? Okay, so price as a double is we're basically going to store the price we get from the user, right? Why is price a double? Someone who hasn't said anything. Someone from the back row. Why is price a double? So if no one says anything, I'm going to pick on someone. Yes. Because it's going to be decimal, right? So this is one of those places where we are actually allowed to make assumptions. Money is decimal, right? This is not, no one is making any, it's not necessarily an assumption, it's a fact. You seldom go into a store and find something that's just 10 Rand with no decimal. It's usually 10.99 or someone along those lines, right? Which justifies our decision for making price a double. And the questions I'm asking you right now are the questions that your assistants are going to be asking you when they're marking you. When you're sitting next to them and they say, why is this way? We're not asking you because it's wrong. We're asking you because we're trying to understand if you understand what you are doing. And if you can't answer the question, it makes us wonder whether or not this is your code. Okay, so all happy with price being a double because money generally has decimal points, right? Okay. Are we happy with bottles being an integer? Okay. Who says yes? Show of hands. Who says no? Who says they don't want to participate? Because there were a few people who didn't have their hands up. Yes. I disagree. And again, just because I disagree does not mean I'm right. I'm just saying my personal feeling on this is you guys are wrong. Okay? So what happens if a bottle of Coke is $23.90? How many bottles of Coke can I buy with that? Yes.
So 23.90, going to say 590.
Okay.
The probability that the answer is going to be decimal.
The answer is going to be a decimal, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You said exactly, but you said you are okay with it being an integer. Okay.
But
Do you see what just happened here? What are the chances that the answer, what are the chances that my bottles, the amount of bottles I can get with 500 has a decimal point? What are the chances? They're very high, right? Yes.
Well, but reply though, because you can't exactly get like 2 bottles in a pot. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, no, you can't go to print there and go, this is how much I have, give me all the bottles I can get. And then the psalm says, you can get 21.2 bottles, and you're like, give me my 0.2 of a bottle. That doesn't work. But now we're looking at two different things. We're looking at what is the sum of my calculation going to be? So what is the sum of the calculation going to be? It's going to be a double. What am I going to show the user? I'm going to show them an integer. But we need to cater for both of them. Because when the computer is calculating it, it is going to bring back a double. Regardless of the fact that you can't buy 2.5 bottles of Coke, but your answer is going to come back as a double. Understand? Whenever, a rule of thumb, if ever this confuses you, rule of thumb is whenever there's division involved, chances are very high that your answer is going to be a decimal. So you should always make that answer a double. Okay. Everyone happy? Online people, are you happy that we're going to change bottles from an integer to a double? I can actually change the name of the variable as well to calc ans. Does that make sense? So now instead of the bottles, it's not about the bottles. This is the answer to the calculation of how many bottles are you going to get, which is a double. Then we can add a third variable. Does this make sense to everyone? So which variable are we going to show the user? Num bottles. Okay. Anyone have a different set of variables to the ones that I do? Again, just because I am standing in front here does not mean, if you feel I am saying something wrong, by all means, you have the right to challenge me. Does anyone else have more? Does anyone have less? Okay, so once again, given the information that we have in front of us, the inputs, the outputs, and the variables, draw up an algorithm for me. That's obviously the number of steps we're going to need to get to the answer or to solve the problem at hand. I'll give you another 2 minutes. So there's a question that says, would making calc ans an integer mean it would automatically round up or down? Well, it depends on the coding. It depends on the language that you're using. So when it comes to informatics, Visual Basic, if you just convert an integer, a double into an integer, it chops off the decimals. So in our instance, that would be ideal, because if it says 5.5 bottles and it chops off the 0.5 and just saves 5, we're still in the clear, right? But would you be happy if your final mark was 49.5 and I just converted it into an integer and it chops off that 0.9? It chops off that 0.5, now your final mark is 49. No. So just like in class today when we said we're taking the control back, we're not going to allow the computer to do things on our behalf. We want to do things ourselves. So instead of allowing the computer to decide whether it's going to round up or down or whatever, we are going to explicitly tell it what we want it to do. Okay. So again, yes, there's a question that says, what if before you output, you convert it into an integer and then now you have two variables. Okay, so what happens in a situation where we want to know how many bottles were we supposed to get if there was a situation where you can get decimal values? You no longer have that original value. But in this case, if ever down the line I want to use that decimal number, can I use the decimal number here? Have I stored it? Can I use it? Yes, I can. But the student online says what they want to do is they'll calculate it as a double, keep it as a double, but convert it to an integer when they're displayed. Okay, is the integer that's being displayed stored anywhere? No, it's not, because you're just converting for displaying sake. If later down the line you want to use that integer, what do you need to do? You need to reconvert the double. So again, one of those things. If we are doing this multiple times, how difficult do you think it's going to be? Every single time I want the integer value, I need to cast the double. It's going to be a lot of work. But in this case, I'm casting the double once to an integer and I'm storing that value. So whenever I want to refer to that value, I no longer have to do that calculation anymore. I just refer to the value that I've stored. Does that make sense? Yes, no, maybe? Okay. Your 2 minutes are up. Someone from the second last row, give me your algorithm. Second last row, that's one of the four of you. Yes, step one. Price is equal to okay, let's leave it there. Is this correct? Rest of the class, is this correct? Someone said no. Who said no? Why is it not correct? Sorry? I can't hear you. Can the people around you hear me? You have to add the conversion. Okay, you're right about that, but not answering my question. Is that correct? What is an algorithm? It's a series of steps that you're going to undertake in order to get to the answer, right? Is this an algorithm or is this code? This is code. Have we started coding? No, we have not. What am I looking for at algorithm? I want you to tell me step by step what you're going to do to get to the answer. So again, forget, we haven't, ideally we're still writing on our piece of paper. We haven't started coding it, right? Now it's just steps of, I'm going to do this, then that, then that, then that. And that's how I'm going to go about solving this problem. Okay, so right here, our misunderstanding was you thought this was code. But that's why we're saying the design is very important because it's just a series of steps. So, anyone else? Third last row? Yes. Would be? I can't hear the first word. Read price, okay? I would rather, instead of read price, I'd say get price from user. That is pretty much the same thing, right? Second step. Okay, third step. Okay, any more steps? Just those. Does anyone have other steps? Yes. Store price, okay. So you are correct, but you have grossly oversimplified this problem. Can you see that there's steps that you missed? So I'm going to get the price and I calculate answer. How am I doing that? What does calculate answer mean? If I came here and I said, calculate answer. What are you going to do? Do you know how to calculate answer? No, right? So you oversimplify it to a point where this is what you think. This is what you should think about a design. It should be a piece of paper that you can hand over to someone else, and that person should be able to, without even understanding or reading the question, just from inputs, they should be able to implement it. Right? So just from input, if I had to cut out line 1, just from input, do we know what we are doing? From input, variables, and algorithm. Calculate answer. Does that make sense to anyone? No. So if I gave you a piece of paper and said do this, you would not be able to do it. So with your algorithm, think about it as we like referring to cooking, for instance. It's like cooking. Imagine if you bought ingredients for a cake, and it said preheat oven to 180, mix your eggs and your what you call it, flour, and then it says bake. Is that informative? Will you know what you have to do? No. So you need to simplify your steps in such a way that a person that has no idea what they're doing will be able to execute this. So let's try and break it down. Let's try and make it simpler. So the first step I agree with. We need to get the price from the user. What's the next step? Step 2, what are we going to do after getting the price from the user? We're going to store the price, right? So our next step would be store the price and variable price. Okay? All on the same page? What are we going to do after storing the price and variable price? Yes. We're going to divide 500 by price. Okay. So we will have Is everyone happy with step 3? Then what? Yeah.
Would you store the alpha also variable, the price that you get, the one that you get?
Okay, so is that the next step or do you want to add it to 3?
I think it would be the next step.
Next step, okay. So next step would be 4. Okay, next step, yeah.
Can one line of code have multiple steps? Like one, like your algorithm?
It can, but that's frowned upon. Because if we have 3 things happening in one line, if that one line does not execute, which part is broken? Are we able to debug which part is not going right? No, it becomes more difficult to tell which of those 3 things that this line is doing is actually throwing an error. And there's a difference between your code not compiling and your code giving you the wrong answer. And in all honesty, it is easier to deal with a program that crashes than it is to deal with a program that gives you the wrong answer. Anyone care to tell me why that's the case? Yeah. So we have syntax errors and logic errors. Syntax errors are easy to solve because usually Visual Studios will have a little red squiggly line say, this is wrong. The syntax here is wrong. You are missing this, you are missing that. Logic errors, on the other hand, are difficult because there's nothing wrong. Visual Studio sees exactly what you're doing. So for instance, if we did this, does that work? Are we going to get an answer from that? Is that going to crash our code? No, our code will not crash. Is that going to give us the right answer? No. Do we know we're not getting the right answer? In this case, we know because I highlighted that one line. But if we had written our code, would we know exactly where the code is crashing or why we get the wrong answer? No. Right? But it's easier this way. If everything is on its own line, we can try and figure out what went wrong. Okay, so next step. The 5. Let's pick on someone else. Someone from this side. Man, yes, what would the next step be? We should show, what are we showing to the user? The answer. Okay, but the answer is, what data type is the answer? The double. What does the user want to know? How many bottles they can buy? Okay, and we established that we can't buy half a bottle of Coke. So with showing the user 7.5 benefit. No. So after calculating and getting 7.5, what do we need to do? We need to convert. Calculate number of bottles. Okay, so we've got 7.5. What do we do with that 7.5 to get 7? Round it down. Right? That would be the next step, ideally. Okay. Online people, what would be the next step? So what comes after 5? Any second now. What comes after 5? Convert the data type? No. Remember, converting data types, which part of it is converting data types? When we are talking about what we're going to do we have to convert data types? At this point, do we know anything about data types? No, right? This is you saying, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to get this, put it in there, get that, put it in there, and get that, put it in there. So conversions are not really important here. This is just text. Conversions are more code specific, language specific. It's code and not the algorithm. Okay. Now that we've rounded down the value, what are we going to do? Show calc ans to the user. No. Do we want to show calc ans to the user? Calc ans is still 7.5. So if we show calc ans to the user, our step 5 is useless because we just rounded it down. For what reason? Yes. Okay, so the next step would be step 6. And it would be that makes sense. So we take the value that we have gotten from rounding down and store it in num bottles. So now we have price in price. We have calc answer stored in the calculation of the answer. We have the number of bottles stored in the variable num bottles. What's the next thing? Yeah. Yeah.
But shouldn't you say how you're going to round down?
No, you shouldn't say how you go. Your design should not be language specific. You should be able to give it to someone and they should be able to implement it in whatever language they choose. Yeah. Because rounding down is rounding down, regardless of what language. So maybe in one language, it's just round. In another language, it's math.round. In another language, it's a different function altogether. The only thing we are concerned about is the end result. Has the value been rounded down? Yes, that's all we care about. Next step. Yes, ma'am. You can now show the answer to the user. So what would be the actual line? What should I write, rather? So 7. What are we showing to the user? Which variable are we showing to the user? Good. Does anyone else have a different algorithm? Well, obviously everyone has different algorithms, but do you understand why this one makes sense? If I gave this to you and say implement it, would you be able to implement it? It's step by step, written out step by step. Step 1, get this from that person. Step 2, store it. Step 3, calculate. This is the calculation. Store that calculation. Do this, store that, display that. Do you need to understand what this algorithm is doing? No, you can just implement it and see. Right? Okay, we've got some. Okay, so events and actions is another table. Just going to copy it from this. So yesterday you guys learned about events and actions. Am I correct? This was yesterday. So an event, what is an event? Someone who hasn't said anything. The person in the bucket hat there. What is an event? Is so an event triggers an action. That's okay. About you're drawing very horrible. But you were on the right track. An event triggers an action. What is an action? Yes. Clicking is the event. What is an action? What happens when you click the button? That's the answer to the question. What happens when you click the button? An action happens. That's what an action is. So as far as events and actions, each and every button will be an event. Not all events are button clicks. You do have other events, but at this point in time, it's a button click. So in your events and actions table, you will have event, and you will have action on the other side. Okay, so let me just get rid of this. So what event do we have? So our event in this case, this is stuff you haven't done, so I'm just gonna fill it in for you. We will have that's our event. Our event in this case, let me just get rid of the rest of them. Our event in this case is btn calc underscore click. So I'm assuming that my button is going to be called btn calc, right? Actually, I've skipped something here. I've skipped a step after algorithm. There should be interface 4. Then events and actions will be 5 because it falls under interface, and then test data will be 6. So please draw out your interface. At this point, you guys know exactly what an interface looks like. We've been working with interfaces for the last week now. So remember, as you're drawing your interface, make sure it has a form, buttons, labels. Make sure you label them, make sure you name them, and all that jazz. Yeah, so online there's an answer that says actions are consequences of an event, which is true. But at the moment, let's just slow down on that and do our interface. Yes. You draw it. You have to draw it on paper. So right now, again, we haven't started coding. You're just visualizing what it's possibly going to look like. Okay. And we seldom get, we usually, not seldom, we usually get questions where students say, are you going to compare my interface on my design to the actual interface? No, not really. The reason why I want you to draw an interface in your design is so that we can see that you've conceptualized what it's going to look like. If you start coding and you decide you want to separate things or you don't want them to be aligned as you had aligned them on your paper, that's completely fine. There's no issue with that. But we want to see that you've thought it through. Yes. You can write what? Events and actions. No, you can just write button this. But again, the reason why I did that is I realized as I was doing my events and actions that I don't actually know how many buttons I'm going to have. So that's why interface comes before events and actions. So you have your interface and then you'll say, basically, as you see that interface, we have button this, button that, button that. When you click on button this is what's supposed to happen. You click on that button, this is what's supposed to happen. Does that make sense? Okay. How much time do we have left? Kind of plenty. So also it doesn't need to be symmetrical, it doesn't need to look that great. As long as it's got its labels in there, everything's got its name. Okay, so this is what my interpretation of the design was. I did it in MS Paint, so please don't judge me. But there you go. Does it have everything I need? Yes. Is it skew? Yes. Would you get all your marks if this was what you did? No, because you need to do it with your hand. At least you can be neater than what I did. But what is important on this? What is important is the fact that my form has a caption. Can you see that? My form has a name. My text box has, here's my text box has a name. Here's another text box, it has a name. Here's my button called BTN Calc. So at this point, I still, ladies and gentlemen, have not started coding. Yes.
Would you label the actual labels like LBL?
You don't have to label the actual labels LBL and all of that because you never actually refer to them in the backend.
Oh.
So there's no need to do that. If you want to, you can, but there's really no need to do that. The reason why with the form is referred to in the backend. The text boxes are referred to in the backend. The button is referred to in the backend as well. So again, now, if you look, I have BT and Calc, right? If I had multiple buttons in my events and actions, when I say BT and Calc, do you know which button I'm talking about? No, I'm saying right now it's BT and Calc, right? In my design, I mean in my interface. Right here, when I say the event is when you click BT and Calc, do you know which button I'm talking about? Because of that name. So that's why you should name all of your buttons. Okay, does anyone have a different interface to the one I do? Just bring it back up. No, basically it doesn't need to be exactly the same, it just needs to have two text boxes, one button. In whatever order you want. If it has two text boxes, it needs to have two labels that accompany those text boxes so that the user knows exactly what input needs to go into each text box or what output is going to come out of that. Yeah.
So when you the text that is actually stated in the text box, would you put like bypass box to be about 500 because that's what you do?
Well, number of bottles is number of 2-liter bottles could work.
The like price of 2-liter bottle would be. Oh no, never mind. Sorry, I got confused.
Yeah, so the first one is how much a 2-liter bottle costs. That's input. But the second one of number of bottles is output. So ideally, what I would have done is, can I edit this? I can, but I would have put the button between the input and the output. So it's input, press button, output. So you're not confused as to, are both of them inputs or is there an output?
So because of this, the code thing is coded for you have 500 rand. Will you put that on the form for 500 rand? This big code's for 500 rand, so would you show it on the interface?
You don't have to, but you can. Maybe on the caption of the form, you could say 500 Coca-Cola bottle calculator, something like that. But you don't necessarily need to. You don't explicitly need to say that. We're going to assume that whoever our client is who asked for 500 knows that this calculates for 500. Okay. Any questions with the interface? Yes, we have some questions. Why is your number of bottles before the button? It makes no sense. I know. I have addressed that already. Okay, you see. So also, as again, I'm going to say, I think this is the 6th time. Just because something was done by me does not mean it's the only version of the truth. Okay, you can have your own interpretation of it, and if it's correct, I will definitely give you the mark. And in this case, I do realize the idiocy of now it looks like there's 2 inputs. But if there was input button, then output, it would be a little bit better. If this was Visual Studios, I could just drag and drop them. But unfortunately, I cannot do that. If this is Paint, it will take me a while to move those 2 around. Okay, so let's move on to events and actions. So because we only have one action, event, what is the action? So ideally, the action would be you are going to, in simple English, explain what's going to happen when the button is clicked. Okay, so that's the event in action. Something as simple as okay, so a simple explanation of what action is going to happen. Yes.
But if it's on one page, can't you just say for action refer to the respective step in the algorithm?
You could, but now I have to go back up. You could find that all of this is not done in the same button, right? So I could have one button for getting the price from the user and storing the price, another button for calculating, and another button for display. So in that case, I would say for BTN input, get input from user. For BTN calculate, calculate how many bottles. For BTN display, display the answer, something like that. So you won't always just have one event. Yeah, in this case, yes, it's kind of redundant because everything in the algorithm happens in that one button. Yes.
And since we have one event in this scenario, should we also highlight in the action that that event is going to also show the user?
Yeah, you can if you want to. With 500, calculate the number of bottles can be bought with 500. And display it to user, something along those lines. It doesn't need to be here. We're just trying to see if you understand what each and every button is going to essentially do in simple, plain English. Yes. Yeah.
So when does a computer actually store it while the person has typed it in?
It stores it in a variable. So at this point, if all of our algorithm is going to happen on that button click, it will do it while step by step while you're running the program. Yeah. Yes. Questions with events and actions? No. Okay. So essentially, we're kind of done with our design. Is there anything else we still need to design? We're quite happy with what we've done, right? When we started coding, Still no. There's one last part of a design that you need, which is called test data. This is where you kind of get your testing your algorithm before you actually implement it. So we go into what are our variables. So we have price, calc, aunts, and num bottles. So I'm going to say price, calc, aunts, num bottles. Okay. Basically, this is what we're going to do. We're going to have 3 or more, minimum of 3 cases where we're going to test this out. Okay, so let's start with 20. To start with 20, how much is my calc answer going to be? How much is it going to be? This is simple math. I hear murmurs of 25, but no one is confident enough. 25, okay. What is our num bottles going to be? Okay, to represent the actual data type, I'll say, what is our num bottles going to be? 25. Okay, so secondly, let's say 55. Don't blame if you use your calculator. 55. Sorry? 9.09. Okay. What is our num bottle? 9. Anyone want to give a go? A number? I'm literally asking for a random number. The level of stress and pressure should be 0. Just whatever comes to your brain, tell me that number. I heard 8. 8. What is our calc answer going to be? Yes. 62.5. What is our num bottles going to be? 62. Okay, let's leave it at 3. Does anyone understand why we do this? Is it evident why you need a test data? Why? Anyone can tell me why? Show of hands, why do we need test data? Yes.
If you get, or in the event that you get something that it doesn't correspond with your code, like with your algorithm, like it doesn't work.
Yes, so basically this tells you whether your code runs or not. So ideally we're going to take all of this design and implement it in Visual Basic. The idea is if I input 20, I should get an output of 25. If I input 55, I should get an output of 9. If I input 8, I should get an output of 62. What does it mean if my outputs are wrong? If I'm calculating on the computer, I'm running my program, and the outputs I'm getting are not the same as my test data. Yes. It means you have logical errors. This is why test data is important. For the assistants as well, when they mark your practical, I provide them with test data to say, input this, this is what should come out. When they do that and it doesn't, you're not going to get all your marks. To compare your answers with the code, yes, exactly. That's why you need, but usually you need to, this question is not necessarily that great of a question. Okay, we can try something like 0. If it's 0, what's calc aunt? It's a simple math, 0. What's going to be num bottles? 0. So I'm testing like the edge cases. If I'm testing 0, if you get any other answer besides 0, you've screwed up somewhere. Sorry? Undefined. Could be undefined. It's most probably going to say 0. The computer will, or it will crash and blow up. So just try it and tell me how it goes. Why wouldn't it be infinity since it's free? Well, we're talking about mathematically so. Okay. But yes, ideally this would be, I don't have an infinity key on my keyboard, and your computer will, oh, for those of you that do that, don't be afraid to make undefined calculations or infinite calculations on your computer. Visual Basic is smart enough to have a RAM cap. So it holds on a piece of your RAM, and the moment you try and eat more than the RAM that it has allocated, it will crash. It will take some time, but it will eventually crash. You'll see how fun that is when we start doing infinite loops. Okay, I think that's all the time we have, ladies and gentlemen, and I am expecting a design from you tomorrow, so you best get started with Practical One's design. Okay, you can ask that later. Ladies and gentlemen online, do you guys have any questions? Actually, we still have 5 more minutes, but this is all I have. How many pages is the design? It basically depends on how big your handwriting is. So I don't know. As long as you have all of these 6, you should be okay. Where is the assistance lab? The assistance lab is an E rank 211. So when you get to the academy, there's like the little fishbowl where the administrative assistants are. On the left is where the lecturer's offices are, right? Don't go left, go right. They should be 211 should be the second door on your right. Okay. Yeah, if there aren't any more questions, I will see you guys tomorrow.
I'm planning to open my what you call it, Discord. It refers me to the app that Discord. So I don't know.
Have you looked at the guide online?
I've looked at it, but I also tried that way, but it also refers me to the app. So I was kind of confused.
Yeah. Is there anything wrong with using the app?
The app needs the HTTPS stuff long thing, which I don't have.
What do you mean you don't have? Download the app on your phone and then.
It is on my phone, but it needs this HTTP. I don't know, this long link to the server.
But the link to the server is on E. So if you click on the join us on Discord link on E, it should provide you with the link.
Yes, maybe, sorry to ask you this, maybe you might get a bit angry, but I just want to know about, you see about the 14 weeks that you said due to COVID, some semesters are shorter than others. Must you make like a checkbox basically, like in order for it to insert like the number of weeks that you should put, or
Do you know how many weeks a semester is?
they said it's usually 14 weeks, but now it's usually shorter due to COVID.
Do you know how many weeks a semester is?
Yes, it's 14.
For the program's sake, do you know how many weeks a semester is?
No,
Okay, so where do you get that information from?
from the youth.
Correct.
Oh, thanks.
Okay, yes,
Sir, how can we access previous year's protocols
you can't. Why do you want to do that?
to use them as practice to
The only thing we can give you for practice is the semester test past papers. We'll upload those in a week or 2. Yeah.
so tomorrow when will I find you if I want to give you the design?
In the labs,
Computer
evening
labs.
till 3.
Oh, evenings. So if you do it online,
If you're doing it online, you'll be allowed to upload it using Google Drive. We'll upload the link onto Discord.
So I went to one of the assistants and I showed them my design of the interface.
Yeah, please cover your nose.
And I showed them my design of the interface. And then he said that the only thing I need to add now is the algorithm. But I never do all this what you just explained, except for the interface and the algorithm.
So you need to do everything that I explained.
All of this.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry, I know I asked you this in the beginning, but just to clarify, in my text box, I did this. So was it supposed to be this?
This is wrong. This is the text box name. So the text box would just be txt price without the text.
Okay. Okay, yeah. So without the text.
Yes.
But then.
Let me just stop the recording here and disconnect.